Welcome to another episode of All Opinions. Welcome. Today we've got a fantastic guest. We've got Aaron Brown, a co-founder of Fishing for Leave. Now, you're probably going to remember those guys, the amazing moment, a significant moment during the Brexit campaign when they sailed a flotilla of fishing ships right down the Thames here. So, Aaron, tell us a bit about Fishing for Leave, how it started and how you got involved.
Well, it started because the two main representative bodies that purport to represent the industry, in our view, negated their responsibility to campaign for an industry obviously everybody knows has been well hammered in the European Union, probably one of the archetypal industries to show how bad European policy has been. And they came out and said they wouldn't campaign, so a bunch of us got together, people from Save Britain's Fish and Fowl who'd long campaigned for withdrawal from the CFP and the EU, and other skippers that were discontented, and we got together and we went from there.
But Remainers always say, but fishing is a tiny proportion of British GDP. Why is it so significant?
Well, the first thing to ask them is, how much is your job worth to GDP? It's a very besmirching attitude to say other people's livelihoods don't matter. All our livelihoods matter. A country isn't just one particular block. Often the Conservative Party is accused of that. It's focused in the City of London. A country's made up of all its different components, its bricks. You need each one. So fishing has a crucial role to play. It provides food security, which is crucial, particularly in an island nation. It provides hard currency earning with our foreign currency earning with our exports. It provides employment in rural and coastal communities. On top of that, I actually think it engenders a lot of skills, life skills as well, in the same way the army does, because it is quite a hard job. But the most important thing of that, for the political side of it, is I think it just typifies our enmeshment in the EU. No other industry has been as hammered, and no other industry has come to symbolise and show real hard, bad effects of losing control, of losing our sovereignty.
So just how punished do you think Britain's coastal communities have been by the common fisheries policy?
Oh, well, hugely. I don't think anyone can dispute that. Obviously, Remainers will try and say, oh, well, it was going to happen anyway. That's not the case, although nobody can argue with a crystal ball. But I mean, there's so many ports that are totemic in the public's mind of being fishing ports that aren't. You've got Whitby, Scarborough, Shields, hanging on by its fingernails, Eyemouth. You've got a huge number of ports that people see as fishing ports that aren't anymore. To put some scale on it, you've not got a major fishing port left between Plymouth and Peterhead.
And can you sort of just set out for the layman, as it were, some of the quotas and the restrictions and the penalties that our industry faces thanks to the EU?
The biggest thing, and this is one I really would like to nail the Remainers lie, they say, oh, we sold our quotas. No, we didn't. What happened is when we joined up, everything went into a common pot, EU pot, under equal access to a common resource. And after 10 years of everybody having a free-for-all in our waters, which are obviously some of the richest in the northeast Atlantic off the European continent, all of a sudden the EU said, oh, we've got a conservation problem. Oh, really? You've let all these boats in and suddenly we've got a problem. So then they said, we'll have quotas to protect fish stocks. Now, a lot of people think this was more cynical. It was a part of political integration to divvy up fish to the different member states. So what happened was, although Britain puts in 50% of the waters and 60% of the catches, we only get 25% of the quotas. The rest of what should be ours under international law goes directly to the member states. Now, what the Remainers have picked up on when they say we sold quota is that when the British fleet really started to struggle with that initial appropriation of what should be our resources, the loss of half of our catches, big EU flagship companies, so they're EU-owned companies but they're registered in the UK, started to buy out struggling British fishermen. So not only does the EU make off with half our resources directly, but another 50% of what we do get, of that 25% we do get, is held by these EU flagships. So the indigenous British fisherman is only operating on about 12% of the quotas when it should be 60%. We're working in a fifth.
Outline, if you can, the madness that we hear of having to throw fish back.
Well, this is the next worst thing about the quota system, is not only has Britain been robbed of our resources, but to kind of add insult to injury and rub salt in the wounds, what then the quota system does is it tries to impose stringent individual species targets for every species. So you've got one for cod, how much cod you can catch, haddock, saithe. But of course that completely ignores the biological reality that what we have around the British Isles is what's called a mixed fishery.
Yeah.
So all these species swim together. So it's impossible for any fisherman to go out and try and just catch what his quota decrees he can. So what ends up happening is you catch this mix of fish, you can keep 3 of the species out the 4, and you've got to say throw all the cod back. You've then got to go and catch more fish to find what you need to be viable, and at the same time you're catching cod. So you're actually catching double, the statistics show, we're catching double what we need to make a living to find what we can keep. And of course the worst bit about this is that what then happens is science has not a clue what's going on, because instead of the boats landing everything they catch and scientists can see stocks fluctuations and different interactions, they're only seeing what they decree in a bit of paper. So the system talks to itself. So if they cut the cod quota, cod catches go down. So they cut it again and cod catches go down further. So you've been locked into this kind of negative feedback loop. So you're killing twice of what you need to do in the environment. The quotas and the science is way out of line with Mother Nature. And at the same time, you're economically bankrupting your fleet. So it's failed the environment, it's failed the economy, and it's failed fishermen as well.
I heard something heartbreaking, really, and also just mesmerisingly dumb. Last week,
Something
in Brussels,
dumb from Brussels.
Well, yeah.
You're joking.
Nigel Farage pointed out that the United Kingdom has a 0 quota on tuna.
Yeah.
Yet, off the coast of Cornwall right now, there are tons and tons of tuna that the Spanish can come and catch.
Yeah, well,
and
I think they've got,
I
I can't remember the exact figure, but I think they've got like 30,000 tonne quota, the rest of the EU, and we've got zilch. So, of course, if Britain was an independent coastal state, which we can be with a clean Brexit, automatically be. So if we leave, Article 50, as everybody's well established, says the treaty cease to apply.
Yeah.
So under the EU's own agreement, its own treaty, everything stops. And that obviously includes the CFP, so there's no more equal access, there's no more quota shares and all the rest. That Britain automatically reverts to being an independent coastal state, like Norway, Iceland and Faroe. So we can then go to the international negotiations alongside Iceland, Norway, and we say, excuse me boys, it's quite clear now we've got these fish in our waters, would like to take some of them, Britain's got to have a share of this quota. And obviously there's a bit, as always goes on, there's horse trading. So the Norwegians say, oh, well, if we vote for this, you give us some maybe 10,000 tonnes of mackerel in exchange. But we'd be free to do our own deals. Inside EU just now, we're locked in a straitjacket.
Well, here then, I'd like to play devil's advocate, because a guy over there called Boris Johnson has just done an amazing deal with the European Union, surely.
Well,
and it says in that treaty, I read it about 4 minutes after it was published last week, it says that Britain will become an independent coastal state. So what's your problem with this treaty?
It's a dire deal, because all through the deal it says, with respect to Britain's sovereignty, Britain will be independent, this. And then effectively, in Euro language, as they write in, it then has a but. But you will not interfere, a good one that people are up in arms about, or pursue foreign policy that could conflict with the EU. You will be an independent coastal state, but it will be based on a level playing field, non-discrimination. So what the EU is trying to drive us towards after the transition, and let's be clear to people at home here, we leave in name only here. It's Brexit in name only, and it's appalling that many of who I thought were principal Brexiteers have voted for effectively the same agreement that they trashed before. Because we leave, we get Brexit done, but we reobey all EU law instantly. So we're locked into every EU policy, dot and comma, which we must obey under the terms of good faith for the transition.
But Tory Brexiteers would have us believe that this would allow us a seat at a bargaining table to do a fresh deal with the European Union, which will give British industry a shot in the arm, surely.
There's two fallacies to this. One's political and one's the reality of the text. So sticking to fishing, what we are driven towards at the end of this transition, which there's no way the EU is going to agree a free trade agreement by this time next year. The transition will be extended, and because we've got a Remain Parliament working at the behest of the EU, they will push the Prime Minister, whether he likes it or not, to extend. So let's be honest here, the transition is going to run to 2023.
Yeah.
You don't need to be a betting person to say that. At the end of this transition, what the Tories are hoping for is that we get this wonderful future relationship. But you read the political declaration, so as you alluded to, it says...
I've read it in its entirety.
We will be an independent coastal state, but the caveat is, any deal, which we should agree, because Article 185 of the withdrawal agreement pushes us to agree the political declaration is the basis of the future relationship. It's not optional, like they're pretending. We're pushed to it. Says it will be based on a level playing field.
And it very specifically mentions phrases like shared quotas,
Well, it does,
doesn't it? I mean, there's no grey area.
Shared quotas. So the EU is going to try and push that we've got some sort of bilateral agreement where they're going to dominate. They say level playing field. Well, the only way you have a level playing field is regulatory alignment, and no doubt that's going to be EU rules. It says non-discrimination, which is the founding principle of equal access to a common resource. So it's quite evident where we're getting pushed to. It's CFP associate membership. And if anyone doubts that, whether it be on fishing, defence, foreign policy, read through to part 4 of the agreement, I think it's paragraph 87, where it says there is a provision that the UK can have associate membership through governmental structures. So it's clear where the EU is trying to go. So we might be nominally independent, but what we've effectively agreed to is to subcontract or align ourselves permanently with EU rules.
So what you're saying is this has the veneer of giving us coastal independence, but it's basically the same as we've already got.
You're independent as in much as your parents have let you out in the garden, but you still get your baby harness on.
Okay, so
it's a slackening of the treaties, but the EU's basically saying we'll still have an agreement in fisheries, we'll call the shots, we'll jolly well be into your waters on non-discrimination. So you might nominally be independent, but for all intents and purposes, the EU's going to say jump.
Okay, so,
we have to say how high.
In simple terms, is Boris Johnson's treaty with the European Union good or bad for British fishing?
Absolutely diabolical.
Wow. Marks out of 10, with 10 being brilliant, 0 being a dog's dinner.
Well, under the current political reality, the political arithmetic, as the Tories like to allude to, I would give it a 1, because there's maybe a slight chance. But the simple fact is, and this comes back to not just the legal implications, but the political, is the idea that Remain Parliament over there is going to somehow let the government be unbridled to agree a great agreement is just for the birds. If you can't get a clean Brexit through now, you're not going to get a good Brexit through later. So this is why Fishing for Leave, much to the dismay of some of the Tory Brexiteers, but we're absolutely resolute on it, is saying the only way out of this is to bin this agreement, sit tight to a general election, which is probably not going to come until the Fixed Term Parliament Act mandates it, and then campaign in a clean Brexit and get clear out that Parliament and get a Brexit Parliament, Conservative Brexit Party, to drive for what we need.
So in simple terms then, you're saying that by a country mile, there's no other comparison, the best deal for British fishing is a clean break Brexit?
Yes, and that's what people voted for. If you'd sat people down in 2016 and said what Brexit means is adherence or non-conflict with European foreign policy, which effectively gives them a veto on what we do, some sort of alignment with the common fisheries policy, paying 39 billion just to talk about a trade deal when we still obey all EU laws. If you'd ran through all the things in the agreement, people know them now, it's starting to seep out to the public, people would have thought you were mad, but that's what they're proposing.
So what's the sense of betrayal right now amongst Britain's fishermen about this new treaty? I mean, how let down are they feeling?
Betrayals, I'd say it's probably betrayed, disappointed more than betrayal, because you're being told, you're basically been having smoke, to be crude here, you're being pissed on and told it's been raining. It's simply what the government's trying to do. So people are looking at this going, this is no way it's Brexit. We can kind of see an argument of we might get there in the end, but really anybody who's got any political acumen to them can quite clearly see that's a real difficult ask for the government with this current parliament. I mean, the Tories are going about clucking, we've got to get Brexit done. I would liken it in an analogy almost to launching a ship. You do not go and launch a ship that's fatally holed, in which half of the workforce, at the behest of the rival shipyard, is knocking more holes into it just because you've got a launch date. Because everybody might cheer when the ship's launched, but as soon as it starts to settle in the water and sink, there's going to be cold fury. And I do not understand how the Tories think they can get away with this, because when people, I mean, they bounced this agreement onto everybody and with no notice at all before the parliamentary votes, but you're starting to see the incremental tick down in the polls. You're starting to see more and more social media anger as people realise the implications of this. And when people suss out what this deal is, they're going to go mad. So putting aside appealing to party politics and putting aside just industry concerns, I would say to those Tory Brexiteers, if you vote for this, selfishly strip out what's best for the country, you're going to get mullered because people, when they find out what's wrong with this agreement, are going to be furious.
I certainly think you're right that the more time we have to look at this deal, the worse it is for Boris. But look, moving on, a story that was really all over social media amongst Brexiteers, although strangely silent from the Remainers, was these super trawlers off our coasts, registered in Lithuania, Australian super, and they were taking 250 tons of fish per day, as long as 3 or 4 football pitchers, hoovering up the fish from our waters, and we're powerless to send them away. I mean, that surely
that is
a talismanic example.
As a talismanic example, there's equal access to a common resource. A Lithuanian registered super trawler, banned from Australia, unwanted like a leper in the rest of the world, working off the British 6-mile limit, whilst all the local boats haven't got a stitch to catch.
Presumably it's decimating whole ecosystems. I mean, these are like giant hoovers, right?
Well, it depends how good the skippers are. They can target, but with the gear that size, you would say they'll have a substantial bycatch. But I think the real insult in this is you've got a Lithuanian registered. It's owned by Parlevit Wunderplas, the big Dutch conglomerate fisheries company, who also own the likes of UK Fisheries Limited, that makes a big deal of being a British fishing company. It's not. It's an Icelandic Dutch operation. So I think what that story not only shows is the kind of pillage, the exploitation of British waters when our own coastal communities can't. I think also what it shows is the other big issue we've got to deal with, which the agreement kills our ability to do so, and that's this flagship issue, where you've got this huge big Dutch company that's got all these different subsidiaries in Britain, Lithuania, France, buying up entitlement in these countries to then go and hoover up to the detriment. Now our big worry, even if we do get a clean Brexit, is what ends up happening is not only do we have half of the UK's entitlement owned by these flagships, that they all pile across the fence from Europe if we shut them out to re-register here. But of course the political declaration stops us doing anything about that.
Because what can we do about this? Well, just say there's a clean break Brexit.
Well, there's a clean break Brexit, and what we end up can turn around and say is any UK registered vessel has to adhere to what's called economic link conditions. So they have to land, say, 60% of their catch into Britain and have it processed here. They have to have 60% British
creating
crew,
more jobs on shore.
60% British crew and 60% British ownership. So you're ensuring that vessel delivers genuine economic benefit to Britain, which it does. They don't just now. There's barely any economic link. Now, Mrs. Thatcher actually tried to address this with the 1988 Merchant Shipping Act, but again, fishing being at the head of the archetypal display of the symptoms of Europe, she was overridden and squashed by the European Court of Justice, who said economic link conditions conflicted with freedom of establishment and the right to European citizens to set up business anywhere. So Mrs. Thatcher tried to do something about it, but was overruled. We can do it with a clean Brexit, but if we're signed up to this deal, it quite clearly says, and I think in paragraph 128, that freedom of establishment shall not be impinged. So even if Boris did manage to make a break in fishing, did manage to make us like Norway and Iceland and Faroe, where we shut most boats out and look after it for ourselves, there's nothing to stop the whole EU fleet re-registering in Britain.
Right, got one final question, because you've made yourself pretty unpopular because you've been coming out with truth bombs.
Unpopular?
Well, what I'm saying is when people come out with truth bombs that the establishment doesn't like, they try to do hits on you. Channel 4, take it as a compliment.
Yes,
Channel 4 did a hit on you, didn't they? They dug out some Facebook posts and they doorstepped you and they called you a white supremacist. Do you want a right to reply to that? Because you didn't get
you didn't get any right to reply. So no, what they had was they had a Facebook profile from years ago that had a couple of politically incorrect cartoons on it, and I think we should all mock political correctness, because pandering to it, I mean, let's be honest, political correctness is just a way to shut down political debate.
You had a picture of Hitler with a gas pipe. It was in poor taste.
You're taking the mickey out of him. Another one was taking the mickey out of Gordon Brown. I mean, this is how old this post was. In one hand, he had the archetypal British family, I love England, in their T-shirts. On the other hand, they had people that said jihad, death to the infidels, and Gordon Brown's going, yes, and the problem with Britain today is these people. And so it's taking the mickey. We had a link, had one post I think they found that had a link to Stormfront on it, which is a forum. And I would say to that, as to anybody, just because you've got a link to, say, The Guardian or other things from all different sides of the political spectrum doesn't mean, let's say in the case of The Guardian, that you're some mad communists or hard-on Bolshevik, like some of them are. the idea that I run about at the weekend with a tea cosy over my head burning crosses, I think is for the birds. What I am absolutely unequivocally is a nationalist, a patriot, who vehemently, both because of my industry and for the country, disagrees with big global government like the European Union, funded by shoddy characters like George Soros. So it's not the symptoms that I blame, which is, say, if people are focusing on immigrants, or deindustrialisation, on corporates or any of the rest of it. What I do hold responsible for the denigration of Western society and its industries and its culture is those politicians in Europe and their shoddy backers behind them who have obviously deliberate agendas to gut Western society.
Well, I mean, you've certainly come out with a lot of inflammatory points today and a great food for
Thank
thought.
you for
So
having us.
look, it's been a brilliant episode of All Opinions Welcome. Now it's over to you. I mean, we are absolutely livid about the fishing policy in this new treaty. For us, it's an absolute red line. We cannot sail our industry down the river. But what do you think? Is this deal a good deal? Should Brexiteers just live with it and get Brexit done? Or is it a complete betrayal? Over to you. Please get involved across all of our social media platforms. Fire your opinions at will, because this is your show. Thanks for tuning in.